Hey everyone, I'm professional photographer Ian Plant, owner of Shuttermonkeys.com, and welcome to the Photo Critique. My goal is to help you become the best photographer that you can be. And that's why I've started these regular critique sessions to help everyone learn more about the art and craft of photography. If you'd like to submit your images, then just follow the link in the description below this video for a chance to be featured in the next Photo Critique. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Photo Critique. Before we get started, I just want to give a quick shout out to Hunt's Photo and Video for helping make these critique sessions possible. Hunt's makes personal service part of every purchase, and their friendly, knowledgeable staff can assist you in selecting the perfect photo gear. Every episode, I will choose my favorite photo from the ones that were submitted, and Hunt's will give that photographer a $50 gift card. And of course, I want to thank those brave photographers who have submitted their photos for these public critique sessions. And I've noticed that there's a regular group of contributors over at the Monkey Lounge, which is the Shuttermonkeys photo sharing forum, but I'm always impressed to see new names popping up there all the time. So I'm giving a huge shout out to all of you who have helped make this series possible. Guys, thank you so much. I could not have done it without you. All right, enough of this happy, sappy talk. Let's tear up some images and dive right into the photo critique. This first photo is a waterfall image by Mark Whitney, and he took this in the southern Appalachian Mountains, which is not too far away from where he lives. And I think this is a nice photo. Mark, I do like the fact that you included a bit of reflection in the foreground leading to the waterfall, but I think you need to do a little bit more to bring this one home. So if I was there peering over your shoulder, I think the first thing that I would have recommended was to get lower. So right now, the image as you took it, the reflection doesn't actually include the waterfall. The reflection is just showing some of the trees in the background and the sky. So I would have tried to get lower at the very least and maybe backed up or zoomed out a little bit just to give a wider angle of view here. But honestly, I think the best thing would have been to get low enough so that you actually pulled the reflection of the waterfall down into the composition. So I think this would have been a really killer image if you had the waterfall in the background and then you had the reflection of the waterfall reversed in that pool of water in the foreground. I think that would have taken this composition to the next level. This next photo is by Daniel Schmitt, and he says this is sunset taken at the Grand Canyon. And he says that he saw another photographer who had climbed up on the cliff that's in the foreground of this photo, and he was taking a photo from the cliff. So Daniel took a photo of this other photographer taking a photo of the sunset. This is very meta. Daniel says that he took this photo with an 8mm fisheye lens. And to quote the handyman that came to fix an appliance in my kitchen last week, well, that's your problem right there. I think the fisheye probably wasn't the best choice for this photo for several reasons. First of all, fisheyes can make straight lines look really, really curvy. And don't get me wrong, I love using fisheye lenses, but there's a time and a place for a fisheye. And one time and place that might not be best is if you're photographing a scene with a strong horizon line, and the Grand Canyon is nothing if not a strong horizon line, because that horizon line is going to be curved by the fisheye lens. And you can see some of that curvature in this shot here. There's a pretty strong curve. Now this is something that you can correct in the post-processing. You can defish the fisheye lens. But the other reason why I don't think the fisheye was a pretty good choice is I think that you ended up with too wide of an angle of view here. And I think that as a result, you've got a lot of empty space that really isn't contributing to the composition. So for example, there's a lot of empty sky. And having clouds in the sky can be pretty important for landscape photography because the clouds add shapes to the sky and they also reflect color from the setting sun. So without those clouds, you end up having not a lot of interesting things going on compositionally in the sky, and you don't really have much interesting color either. So I think the fisheye gave you too much of a wide angle of view here, and you're taking in a lot of the scene that really isn't helping out. So what you need here is a more selective view. It would have been better if you had just put on a tighter lens in the field, but we can defish this photo and also crop it so that we're honing in on only the most important parts of the scene. So here we go. Let's just do a little bit of a crop here. Let's take out most of that sky and focus the viewer's attention mostly on the part of the sky where you've got something interesting going on, where the sun's going down and where the clouds are. We're going to take out some of that extraneous landscape, a little bit on the left, mostly on the right, There we go. I think that crop focuses the viewer's attention on the most important parts of the scene. So sometimes photography is all about figuring out what to include, or better yet, what to exclude from the composition. And so you don't always want to just take everything in. You only want to include that stuff that's going to make the composition look better. And you're going to want to leave out the stuff that doesn't contribute to that goal or that otherwise distracts the viewer from what is important in the composition. So this tighter crop focuses the viewer's attention on the most important part of the sky and the most important part of the landscape. You also, with this crop, make that small person in the photo look bigger, and that's going to help focus the viewer's attention on that particular spot in the composition. So by making the person in the landscape look bigger, you increase their visual mass, you make them more eye-catching to the viewer, and that's going to help make this composition something that the viewer can relate to more and understand better. So Daniel, the next time you're out there, I advise you to be more selective and include only those visual elements that make your overall composition stronger. This next photo is by Mark Archibald, and he took this in Ricketts Glen in Pennsylvania, which is a really beautiful place. There are just dozens of great waterfalls there. And this is a really nice photo. I think it's very effective. You did a long exposure to blur the water, but you didn't blur it too much. There's still some texture there. And it looks like you used a polarizer to cut down on the glare and reflection that would have made this waterfall image less effective. And it appears that you shot this in the right kind of light for shooting a waterfall. It looks like this was an overcast day, maybe after a little bit of a rain, like it looks like the scene is kind of wet. So these were ideal conditions for optimizing your waterfall photo. And I think you did a really good job. And Mark does ask, how can I make this photo better? And I've got one suggestion that I think would really have taken this waterfall photo to the next level. And I think what you should have done is gotten lower and closer to some of those boulders in the foreground that have autumn leaves on them. So if you'd gotten closer, it would have made that foreground boulder look bigger. It would have made those autumn leaves look bigger and would have made them a much more important part of the composition. And in particular, I think that that boulder that's on the far lower left of your composition would have been a great candidate because it looks like it's got a nice shape. It's got a lot of really nice colorful leaves on it. But better yet, if you had gotten low and close to that, you still would have had all of those beautiful cascades that are right now the foreground part of your composition. Those would have been pushed to the middle ground, but they still would be apparent in the composition. So you would have had the boulder in the foreground, the cascades in the middle ground, and then the waterfall in the background. And I think that would have been a really lovely visual progression. But getting low and close and emphasizing, increasing in size and emphasizing the importance of that foreground boulder and those beautiful autumn leaves would have been really critical to making this a much more dynamic and compelling composition. So this is a really nice job, Mark. This is a very solid photo, but next time you're out there, I want to see you push harder to make a more extreme composition to try to up that wow factor just a little bit more. This is a photo by John Dodson, and it is a lightning bolt that is hitting the south rim of the Grand Canyon. And I think this is a really striking photo. See what I did there? Made a little bit of a lightning pun. Okay, yeah, it's kind of a dad joke. And the sad thing is I'm not even a dad. But nonetheless, this is in fact a rather striking photo, and there's not much more that can be done to make this better. I mean, I love the texture and drama in the clouds, capturing that lightning bolt using that lightning trigger. So for those of you who don't know, a lightning trigger is a device that you can connect to your camera, and I guess a lightning bolt is actually two bolts. There's like a downstroke from the cloud, and then there's a return upstroke. Something like that. It might be reversed. I don't know exactly how it works. But in any event, the lightning trigger detects the first stroke and then fires the camera to capture that second stroke. There's like a millisecond between the two, and the lightning trigger is sensitive enough to detect that and set the camera off so you can actually capture pictures of lightning bolts. And that's pretty cool. And I think John did a great job here setting up his overall composition, incorporating those great shapes of the clouds into the composition. And then it was just a matter of being patient, waiting for that lucky strike. And this was an amazing lightning strike. This is just a big, beautiful bolt. It really lights up that background. There's only one thing that I would recommend, John, that you consider doing differently, and that's tone down the processing a little bit of the foreground. So with the image as you've presented it, you can actually see a lot of detail and color, and I wouldn't recommend doing much. I think you should just subtly tone down the luminosity of the foreground and maybe desaturate it a little bit. So the reason why I would tone down the foreground a little bit is that you want to create a natural visual progression from the foreground to the background. So the foreground is handing the viewer off to the background. And one way to accomplish that is to make sure that the background is actually brighter than the foreground. So if the foreground's really bright or really colorful, the eye might get trapped there and it might have a hard time moving on to the background. So typically what I like to do is to have my foreground be just a little bit darker and a little less colorful than what's going on in the background. So the lightning strike is really bright here. It's just a question of how much you need to tone that foreground down to make sure that the eye's not getting stuck on the foreground, but rather transitions and passes through the foreground in a natural way. So John, I would recommend just toning down the foreground a little bit so it doesn't visually compete with the lightning bolt in the background, and it'll help create a more natural visual progression from foreground to background for the viewer, and it will help them appreciate even more this incredibly stunning photograph. John, well done. 2 thumbs up. Good job. Up next are a pair of images from Paul Imperia, and he says this is sunrise along the Deschutes River in Central Oregon with the aspens at full color. And it looks like there's 2 different versions here. It looks like one version, Paul, you were shooting into the light, and in the second version, you had the light at your back. And it looks like there's some twilight glow maybe going on. This is before the sun is fully above the horizon. So there's some clouds lighting up above where the sun is rising, and those clouds are bouncing and reflecting that light down onto the landscape. And as between these 2 versions, I think I like the second version better, where you had the light at your back. For a lot of landscape scenes, having the landscape front lit, having the light at your back, lighting up the landscape from the front, doesn't always work that well. Often you're going to want some sort of angled lighting, but I do like having that front lighting when you've got that twilight glow going on, when you've got all that reflected light coming off the sky, bouncing down onto the landscape. It gives you this really soft, colorful glow, and I think it's very effective in this second photo. I think it looks absolutely beautiful. With this first photo, it looks like you were shooting into the brightest part of the sky where the sun was rising, and it looks like in the processing phase you tried to bring out some of the detail in those trees that fell into shadow. And this can be challenging because sometimes when you try to brighten up the shadows, they can end up looking kind of artificial, and you can see that you've got a bit of a halo, a processing artifact around those trees that is the result of you trying to brighten them up. I think your best bet would be just to let those trees go into silhouette and not try to artificially brighten them. And I think that when you're out in the field, you should keep in mind, it can often be very challenging from an exposure perspective, shooting into the light. And sometimes it's good to have the light coming in from the side or from your back, especially during that twilight glow. It'll give you a softer, more natural looking light. Now, I'm not necessarily recommending that you never shoot into the light. It just represents a whole series of artistic and technical challenges that you got to make sure you're completely up to before doing it. One thing that I think both of these photos need, these are really nice reflection scenes, and there's a pretty good balance between what's going on in the sky and the landscape and the reflection in the water. But I think both of these compositions need something sticking out of the water. Maybe a bit of shoreline with an interesting shape, or a boulder sticking out of the water, or a fallen log, something that looks pretty good, but that will help break up the symmetry and make the composition more dynamic. Something that's going to create that near-far visual tension that's going to add some depth and enhance the visual interest of your composition. So the next time you're working with a reflective scene like this, take the time, put in the work, and find that interesting foreground to break up that symmetry and to make the visual design more interesting. That is what it takes to take a beautiful sunrise like this and bring it to its fullest potential. All right, here we have another pair of photos by Heinrich Roth, and he says that he met an eccentric farmer who invited him to come look at some old cars on his property. It's really interesting because one of the vehicles had a tree going out of it. So Heinrich actually posted a few images of the same subject. In the first image, Heinrich took a wider view and you can see the Milky Way in the background. And in the second image, Heinrich took a tighter view. There's no sky or stars in the background. This is just a photo of the car. And in both photos, Heinrich did a little bit of light painting to illuminate the car and the tree growing out of it. And I actually like elements of both photos, but Heinrich, I really wish that you had one photo that combined the best of these 2 photos into a single image. So the first image, I like the fact that you've got the Milky Way, but the view of the car isn't quite as dynamic, so you're not really seeing the profile of the car very well. You can definitely see the tree growing out of it, But what I like about the second photo is that you can see the headlights of the car. So Heinrich actually did something pretty neat here. He put little lights inside the busted headlights to make it look like they were actually glowing, like they were turned on. And I think that's really great. That's a really nice touch. That adds some life to the photo and it helps tell a story. The front of this car with those headlights kind of looks like a face. And I really would have liked to have seen that profile view of the front of the car in that photo with the Milky Way. So it would have been great if you had the same or a similar view of the front of the car with those headlights and then gone wider to capture stars in the sky. You don't necessarily have to get the Milky Way in the shot. You know, probably the angle would have been different. The only way to get the Milky Way was where you were standing in the first shot, but that's okay. It doesn't look like you really captured a lot of the core of the Milky Way in that first shot anyways. So it would have been perfectly fine to have gone wider and done a star shot from the other angle where you can see those headlights and just gotten, you know, some points of light up there in the sky. Doesn't need to be the full galactic core, just enough to help tell the story. I mean, otherwise, you did everything great. Your first attempt at light painting was very successful. I think you did a really good job. It can be a challenge to light paint just your subject and not accidentally paint stuff that you don't want to reveal. And I think you did a pretty good job with that. So I'm hoping you can go back to this farm and try it again, but this time get that front profile view and go wider, include the stars and the twilight sky above, and I think you will have a perfect photo that is going to tell a story and really grab the viewer's attention. Next up is a photo from Jim Wood, and this was taken in the North Cascades. And I think this is a pretty good composition. There's a few things that I would have done differently. So first of all, Jim, I think it was a really good idea to exclude most of the sky. It looks like it was just a completely blue sky. No clouds in the sky, so there's not much going on there, so you probably don't want to have too much blue sky. I think, however, that with this shot, you took just a little too much off the sky, and the end result is that the mountain is almost pushed completely to the top edge of the image frame. I think it needs just a little bit more breathing room, so I'm just going to do a quick content-aware crop in Photoshop, and we're just going to bring up the canvas a little bit, and Photoshop will automatically fill in that space with extra blue sky. There. Didn't need that much, just a little extra blue sky to give this photo a bit more breathing room. Second thing is, it looks like you've got a pretty interesting foreground with all these grasses that are floating in the pond, but there's a lot of empty space in the lower right of this composition. So that part of the pond looks like it was completely empty. So I think a good strategy would have been to move more to the left and get more of those grasses kind of evenly spread across the image frame from left to right. Just fill that foreground space with those interesting shapes created by those grasses. And I think this would have eliminated that dead space in the lower right quarter of the image and made the composition a bit more compelling. So just a little extra breathing room on the top and a little bit more creative placement of the foreground grasses, and I think you would have a much more effective composition. And once you get the composition worked out, then all you need to do is keep going back to the same location over and over again until you get the clouds in the sky and the light that you want. So that's what I do a lot, is when I'm scouting a scene or I'm working a scene, I work out all the compositional variables so that I know exactly how to bring the scene to its fullest potential. And then I just have to wait for the proper sunrise or sunset light to bring it all together. So when conditions are good, you can return to that spot, and all you need to do is show up, set up, trigger the shutter, and photo glory will be the result. But you got to put in that preparatory work to make it all happen. This next photo is by Scott Gese of an old schoolyard. And I actually think there are some interesting things going on in this photo. The first thing that I really like is the shape repetition. You've got that little hill in the background, and it's got the exact same shape as that playground feature. So I think this is one of those spinny things where you hop on and you spin around and try not to vomit. Schoolyard days, good times. Another thing that I like about this composition is the way that tree coming in from the right arches over and frames the playset below it. And I actually think that nestling of the two shapes together works pretty well. But there's also some things in this composition that I think are not terribly effective. First of all, I think there's a lot of empty space in the left side of the picture. I don't think that the clouds have got very interesting shapes, so they're not really contributing. And I don't like this building that's coming in from the left either. I think it just kind of pulls my eye to the edge of the image, so it's really not contributing to the overall composition. So I think cropping off a lot of the left would actually be more effective and focus the viewer's attention on that arching shape formed by the tree framing the playset beneath it. But I also think that this scene could do with some more interesting light. This is really flat, dull light, and I don't think it's really doing much in this color version. I think you could convert this to black and white and make this an abstract study of shape, and you could crop off a lot of the left, so let's kind of square this up a bit. What I think you need to do here, Scott, is to go back and work this scene again. I think there's a core concept that's interesting, but I think you need to be more creative to bring it to the next level. This next photo is by Rachel Cain, and this is a foggy morning in Duluth where she happened upon a couple having their pictures taken. And I really like this photo. I especially appreciate the fact that you took a wider view here. Rachel, you resisted the temptation to zoom in just on the couple that was getting photographed. And I like how other elements of the scene contribute to the overall composition. So in particular, those lights that are receding into the distance, I think those are some great shapes. I like that you included the reflection. I wish you had gotten down lower. I think you could have gotten a lower perspective, and that would have made the reflection look better. It would have pulled more of the reflection of the people down into the pool of water, and maybe backing up a little bit would have allowed you to include the edge of this pool of water, and you could have used that shape more creatively as a foreground in the composition. But what I'd really like to see here is a single, more dominant point of interest in the background. So the two edges of the pier create these converging lines, and where those two lines converge is known in art as a vanishing point. And a vanishing point can be a very powerful compositional technique because it creates this natural area of interest. People naturally want to follow lines to where they end, and when you've got two or more lines converging in the same place, that's really going to focus the viewer's attention. Of course, we don't really see the vanishing point here because of all the fog in the distance, so I think it would have been really nice if there were a single person there in the background who could have been a point of interest to enhance that vanishing point effect and created a counterpoint to the couple on the left side of the composition. So you do have a few people walking by. There is that one big person who's bigger and darker than everyone else. I would have preferred if that person were the only person walking, and if that person were in the center of where those vanishing lines are going to converge. That would have been really nice. Of course, when you're working with people or wildlife, it's outside your control where they end up going. So you might have to sit there and wait a long period of time, and it might never really come together the way you want it to. But I think that the key thing here is when you know what you want, you know what you're waiting for, you can put in the time and patiently wait until that actually happens. So this is a nice photo. I think this could have been stronger if you had that stronger point of interest in the background. But overall, Rachel, nicely done. And finally, we've got a photo by Charles Derus, or as his friends know him, Chuck. And this is a photo that he took in the Hoh rainforest of Olympic National Park. And I think this is great. I love the overall composition. There's this great foreground leading to this background that's got this dynamic radial shape. And there's a really nice light and glow to the scene. I have to admit, Chuck, I'm super jealous. I wish I had this shot in my portfolio. So congratulations, you are the official winner of this critique session, and you get the Hunt's $50 gift card. I'll be in touch soon with more information about claiming your prize. Of course, we had many amazing photos that were submitted to the Shuttermonkeys photo sharing forum, The Monkey Lounge. Here are a few that caught my eye and deserve an honorable mention. I'm sorry that I can't critique every photo that is submitted, but please keep posting photos, either for critique or just to share. And if you haven't done so yet, please consider joining our growing community of passionate photographers, helping each other to advance their skills and talent. The best part is that it's completely free. Well, that's it for today, and thank you guys so much for submitting all of these amazing photos to the Photo Critique. And I hope that you found this critique session helpful, and I can't wait to see what you guys have in store for me for our next episode. And we're going to do something a little bit different. For the next episode, I'm actually going to issue a photo challenge, a specific theme, and I'm hoping you guys will go out in the next few weeks and take photos that correspond with that theme, and then I can critique them in the next episode. So just check out the description below this video to learn more about next month's theme. In the meantime, stay tuned for our next amazing photo adventure, and don't forget to subscribe to Shuttermonkeys here on YouTube. I'm Ian Plant, and I'll see you guys next time on the Photo Critique. Landscape photography isn't just about taking pictures of beautiful scenery. It's about telling the story of the landscape, and it's about telling your story as an artist. I'm professional photographer Ian Plant, and my courses are designed to give you the technical skills that you need to succeed and to help develop your own personal creative vision. So, are you ready to share your story with the world? Hey guys, thanks for watching. Here are a few more great videos that I think you'll enjoy and learn a lot from. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get notified by ringing that bell so that you always know when we drop our next helpful video.